Good afternoon. As you know, my name is Davide Ponzini, together with Grazia Concilio, Zachary Jones, Abdallah Girej, and Mariam Karimi. I have the pleasure of kicking off our seminar series, Critical Urban Digitalization. This is the topic of this series of 4 seminars that we are going to host here at Politecnico di Milano. And we felt the need of opening up the discussion to international experts as we are all witnessing an unprecedented process of digitalization, of presence of digital and smart technologies in the way in which we conceive and use cities. In particular, the implementation of so-called smart city strategies has too often relied on ICT operators and technologies, whereas we saw there are substantial implications for democracy, for justice, sustainability, and more generally the way in which we live together in cities that may need further attention. And in this sense, we invited experts to see the interplay of these dimensions and understand the city not only technically but as well politically. Today we are going to have the first session regarding deep transition futures and smart urbanism with Bipashyee Ghosh, and the next sessions will be dedicated to AI in the city with Federico Cugurullo, and digital deliberation technologies with Professor De Liddo, and bugs in the smart city with Professor Metzger. I'm going to briefly introduce the profile of our guest and leave the floor to her, and then we are going to open the discussion. We are lucky to have 2 dedicated discussants, Michelangelo Secchi and Deepa Joshi from Politecnico di Milano, and then we open up the floor eventually to other questions. So our guest today, Bipashyee Ghosh, is a research fellow at the Science Policy Research Unit of the University of Sussex. At the same time, she is a lecturer at the University College London. She has been working extensively in transdisciplinary research regarding transformative innovations and sustainable urban futures. So without further ado, I would leave the floor to her, give her the microphone, if she can clip it, and then come back at the end of her speech.
All right. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I hope all of you can hear me. You can hear me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm based in the UK, and I will introduce a bit of my background just so you know where I'm coming from. And I'm really pleased that I'm having this conversation with experts who are from, urban experts. This is also a kind of a rare opportunity for me because in my projects I work with policymakers, I work with engineers, I work with social scientists more generally, but talking to architects or urban planners is quite interesting, would be quite interesting for me. So I would definitely welcome you to interact and feel free to sort of use this space to share your insights, or even you can of course ask questions on if some of the terms, some of the words that I'm using sounds unfamiliar, or if I'm not explaining things well, feel free to ask, and then I can try to clarify. So that's the title of my talk today. It's a bit of talking about, it has a lot of concepts already, but I will slowly come to how these concepts come together. So deep transitions, futures, urbanism, smart, and then of course global south. Yeah, so with that, I think, let me, all right, so I just wanted to sort of quickly give you a very brief overview of what is my sort of background. So of course I started off, not of course, but I started off as an economist. I did my economics bachelor's from India, then I moved to a more the interdisciplinary master's in Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands, where I studied innovation science. And then I moved to UK for my PhD, which was on science and technology policy. And that is where I did my research on smart cities and urban transitions. So the field was sustainability transitions, and I will talk about transitions, innovation, systemic innovation, and transitions a bit in this talk. In the middle, I actually also spent a year in Japan, in the Momoyama Gakuin University as an exchange student, so I also have a little bit of experience of the Japanese context and working and living in Japan. So that also gave me some sort of insights into life in other places. So currently I'm a research fellow. I finished my PhD in 2019, and in the last few years, which is mainly the pandemic, I have worked in these two projects. So the Policy Consortium is a consortium of policymakers, science, technology, innovation funders, and the Deep Transitions Futures is more in collaboration with private and public investors. So I will talk about research and inputs from these two projects. And I also belong to these networks. So my main core home or academic home is the Sustainability Transitions Research Network, which is STRN. I also kind of co-lead a sub-thematic group within that network, which is Transitions in the Global South, because my research and my interest has always been in the Global South, even though in the consortium I work with partners from quite a few European countries as well. And that's why it's also the EU SPRI network, which is quite relevant to my work. So that's a bit of a broad background. So basically, I will come to you as an innovation expert, as a transition scholar, and I will talk about smart cities from those perspectives. So what I'm trying to sort of put together is really these three broad, in my understanding, broad interdisciplinary areas, which are, systemic transitions, so systemic innovation, deep transition, and futures. This is the kind of work that I do on a day-to-day basis. And then the other aspect is obviously the policy practices. So I would not go into policy making or so on, but obviously, if you have read the paper, then you would notice that it is a lot about policy making. So I would talk about how to transform policy making, because that's quite relevant, I feel, for making of smart cities. And of course, putting those together and what does smart urbanism look like. And then an overarching theme, and I will actually spend a bit of time on desirable futures, because that's what I'm currently looking at. What makes futures desirable? So I would maybe request you to start thinking about desirability already before I come to that, because I think that's something we would discuss hopefully in this talk. And then of course I will share examples from the Global South. Right, so when I look at the Global South, when I think about Global South and urban contexts in the Global South, this is a picture which I feel captures quite well what are we dealing with. It is, you can call it a chaos, there has been reports which call it a chaos, but there you can see you can also interpret this as a kind of assemblages of heterogeneous and diverse innovations, people with different professions, of course, different age, different gender, but also different capabilities. You can see, and since my research has been my PhD research was on mobility, I think this picture captures urban mobility in the Global South quite well, because you can see the tram, you can see the taxi, you can see the bus, you can see the motorbike, you can see the car, you can see people walking. So I can already point out like 5 or 6 modes of mobility, how people move around in this city in the global south, which is Kolkata. So this is what, so the picture is from Kolkata, and I'm basically introducing this city as, it's a mega city because it's, the population is more than 15 million. And I think it's one of the most densely populated cities in India. And 1/3 of this population lives in slums, so in informal housing systems. But what is also interesting to note is that Kolkata has a very high literacy rate. So education is very important. And there are, of course, different levels and different qualities of education available to different income groups and different groups of people. But also, I think this city is as like any city, and that's where I kind of try to generalize a bit, because this is not just about Kolkata. This is about mega cities in the global south, which are facing this sort of very heterogeneous, persistent sustainability problems. So it is not just about the population pressure or the income, low income, or the poverty, but it's also about air quality and health and safety. These are some of the issues. So there is a combination of issues that say urban planners and policymakers deal with in these cities. So these are some of the pictures of also the mobility modes which I researched during my PhD. So before I come to smart city, I think I just wanted to sort of give you an overview of what kind of innovation and how innovation is happening in Kolkata. What are the urban challenges? So of course, there was a article, and there was a couple of articles in the Guardian in the kind of global media around chaotic transport systems and how that can be untangled, efficiency issues, inefficiency of systems, and also sustainability challenges, not just environmental challenges, but social and economic sustainability challenges. But at the same time, you can see some innovation. So even before you think about the smart city, I would like to point out there is always innovation happening in systems in the global south. So the city saw its first underwater metro tunnel being built, and it's trialed just last week. So it will be open. So I just wanted to put it there because it's quite, I feel quite optimistic about it, even though we can talk about this metro project in Kolkata, which has its own sort of characteristics, and it took a long time to come to this point. So this is quite a big moment for the city. And similarly, you have a lot of policies around electrifying mobility, sort of electric buses, and how that the vision for sustainable mobility is sort of being adopted by the policymakers, by the governments, but also by the people. So I just wanted to give you a image of the challenges, but as well as the innovations that are happening in the whole of the city that you can observe, and that makes you think that, okay, how do I analyze the changes in this city? And the city has diverse modes of mobility. Again, I'm staying with the mobility system, because this is where I think it captures the diversity of system and the complexity of system that we are dealing with in urban contexts. So it is not just about the one system and that is unsustainable and that needs to change, it's easy to change. It's very complex than that. So you can see that these different systems, if I consider the tram as a separate system than the bus, than the taxi, one of my publications through my PhD was actually looking into how these different systems are changing, and especially for the bus, I think what could be interesting for you to see to see the massive investment in digitalizing the bus system, the infrastructure, and trying to make, and here I think the rationale for digitalization, and as I spoke with the urban planners and the transport policy professionals, they actually, and I quoted that, they actually said that this is their vision of how Kolkata will travel in the future. So digitalizing a system really encapsulates that future vision above anything else, because of course digitalizing, you can justify digitalization through many other ways like efficiency and transparency and things like that, but I think this is what really captured my attention, that it is about future-proofing the bus system of Kolkata. And also here with the transition of the taxi system would also be interesting from a digitalizing perspective, because this taxi system, what happened is the yellow taxi system is quite a heritage, and it carries a lot of nostalgic value for Kolkata. It's like New York has yellow taxi, Kolkata has yellow taxi, so there is always a comparison and people are very proud of it. But at the same time, we see quite a bit of inefficiency and a kind of decline. In my understanding, there is a decline in that regime, and that space, that space is taken up by Uber and Ola, and so Ola is one of the Indian ride-sharing services, which is also now scaling up and coming to UK and so on. So what was interesting for me to understand was how people were how policymakers thought this transition is going, and I think they mentioned the value of trust. So the idea is that Kolkata really wants to move to the future, and they really see the kind of digital space as something they can trust, because obviously with the kind of negotiations you have to go into with the taxi drivers, and there is a lot of distrust with how they are charging and whether. So there is a lot of you can see underlying tensions between the users in the market, and they think that that digitalizing this system makes this more transparent, and therefore they can trust this app-based ways of calling Uber. So what I wanted to sort of focus on is, if I just move this, so what I wanted to focus on is to say that that when you look at the entirety of Kolkata, which is like a big city, which is a mega city, changes in even a system like mobility has many regimes, and these regimes are changing in many different directions. So some are declining, like the yellow taxi, some are transitioning, some are optimizing. So I have made all these sort of observations around how these different regimes are changing, these changes are actually guided by what I call plural imaginaries of what the future looks like. So there are some discontinuation or suspension of bus routes, the route rationalization, digitalization, servitization. These were some of the imaginaries that were, if I have to sort of generalize, these were some of the imaginaries that were driving the different changes in different directions in all these different regimes. But that also makes you think about whether all these directions of change are desirable or not, and how do we understand desirability of these changes. So who is it desirable for? So making an app-based payment system for the buses, who is it desirable for, and who can afford that, and who is probably not comfortable about it. So I think desirability itself is also not uncontested. So we have to also think about directions as well as desirability. Yeah. So that brings me actually to smart city, because this is what we are definitely focusing on. But but what I did is, what I want to sort of emphasize on in this talk is, I gave that overall context of Kolkata and its mobility system, because smart city Kolkata, when it was being envisioned, it was for a very small part of the city. So what I did is an analysis analysis of the process of transformation of urban India through this lens of socio-technical imaginary. And what this lens does is, it is defined as, what is an imaginary? It is defined as collectively held, institutionally stabilized, and publicly performed visions of desirable futures. And it is animated by shared understandings of forms of social life and social order that is attainable through and supportive of advances in science and technology. So it is, so it has a lot of connotations to, visions of desirable futures, and the role of science and technology for attaining and supporting those desirable visions of desirable futures. So I tried to critically understand that imaginary of smart city in the context of Kolkata, but looking into the national mission guidelines. So there was a national mission, there is a national mission of smart city in India, and then there are regional proposals. So what the city councils did, they had to compete in a national for the national funding. So they had to come up with a proposal, and they had to make this proposal making quite participatory and inclusive. So that was also part of the evaluation of who will get the funding for the making of the smart city, that how they make this proposal. So what I did is I analyzed that proposal making, because I was actually also incidentally there doing my field work for my PhD when that making process was happening, when all of that participatory policy making was happening in the city. Okay. So what I did in terms of methods, and I would not stay on this, because this is just to sort of keep in the background that there was a lot of document analysis, some interviews which are a bit old now, I can realize, but it was mainly discourse analysis, locating descriptions of transformations as these three categories. So I really took this, and this framework was actually designed discursively. So it came from the literature, of course, but as I went through the interviews and I participated in some of these participatory forums, I actually thought these are the three things around how distributed is this smart city, how participatory is this smart city, and how responsive is this smart city proposal, as the kind of three things that characterizes whether the smart city is democratic or not. And of course, there were some questions which I came up with, and I made the analysis based on those questions. So here are some results. I don't think, so it's in the paper, but I think what I try to show in this table is the synergy as well as the contradiction between the national mission guidelines and the smart city proposal. So there is a mission, there is a national guideline which is done across actors from the union ministry, and through the involvement of stakeholders in the national level, and how that is sort of used in, how that is translated in the regional level, in the city level. So again, I gave some examples of how from transport, how the vision was for Kolkata, the vision was for pan-city intelligent transport management, and solutions for enhancing last mile connectivity through bike sharing and e-rickshaws. So these are some of the things that I felt quite captures the notion of how the smart city planners and the practitioners who were leading this whole process envisioned the smart city Kolkata. The national guidelines wanted this proposal to be inclusive, and for it to allow creation of smart citizenry, which is, I'm sure you are aware of, because the smart city literature is very much about, the smart city literature does talk about smart citizenship and what does it mean for people to become smart rather than the infrastructure to become smart or the technologies to become smart. So it does mention that, but also, but I think this was mainly captured through a whole lot of methods of citizens polls and face-to-face consultations. And there was faith in citizen satisfaction with the proposed initiatives and resistances, unanticipated resistances. And for responsiveness, I think we wanted to sort of, well, the national mission guidelines wanted to connect the aspiring future infrastructure and the preference to kind of convergent initiative. And the convergent initiative was really about how some of the initiatives, some of the technological projects or also policy projects could actually tackle multiple sustainability challenges, and how well contradictory voices can be accommodated. So these I picked up from the national mission guidelines, and then how, you know, the smart city Kolkata proposal tried to respond to some of these challenges or some of these criteria for their proposal. So then I am picking up one paragraph from the paper which captures especially this participation side of things, which is quite interesting for me, because what I noted here in this paper is that the top-down framing of the design and practice of participation often prioritize the one-way digital communication, which is consistent with the technocratic and globalizing teleology of smart cities. So it is often, it was very much about some of the mechanisms for inviting participation was not two-way. So there was a lot of media engagement and a lot of publicity and so on, just to make the smart city proposal as a way to make the smart city proposal participatory. There was a dominant influence of the middle and upper class, which is the income groups, rather than the poor and marginalized citizens. So the way the consultations were, and the paper does go into the details of what the poorer and marginalized people whom I interviewed thought about these kind of consultative forums, because sometimes they did say that they just didn't have the time to spend 4 hours in a day to participate in these forums. So predominantly these forums were dominated by retired, and I did observe this also in the paper, male participants who had the time to engage and to contribute in this. And the emphasis was really to show the quantity of participation, the number of people that came rather than the quality, and also the focus was on identifying citizens' needs and concerns rather than the co-creation, rather than trying to see how they can do things together. So possibilities for and finally, possibilities for citizens to challenge the content was not really nurtured, and this was part of the time frame, because at the end, did the policymakers I interviewed, they did say that there was time constraints and they had to really clean up things quickly to submit before the deadline for the national competition. So I just wanted to make some observations and highlight some observations rather on the imaginary being lacking the preparedness of uninvited engagements. So there was uninvited engagement. So so it was not like the voices of the visions of smart city, or vision of what Kolkata would look like as a smart city was only invited. There were resistances. There was people talking outside of, or people trying to contribute outside of of the invited sort of engagement process, but that sort of was not captured. There was concentration of power, and there was judgment around layness of people's voices. So it's like how, so it's all, again, I think this comes back in I think in this, again, many authors have highlighted how some of the how basically smart, more technocratic and more voices that sound more knowledgeable comes across, and the people who can frame things better, their narratives sit on the things. So I just wanted to also say that, you know, this whole aspiring future infrastructure and services, and the smart city, of course, curbing the kind of informality, and there's examples also in the paper on how it curbed existing informality around, you know, food markets and things like that. So this whole tension around how to tackle informality reflects a vision of colonial modernity. And it is far from being desirable for majority of the people, of course. So that's my sort of observation from that when I look back and on that research. It's been quite a few years now. I think I look at it from that desirability aspect now much more. So I just wanted to maybe take a moment to ask this question to this room. You know, what kind of world do you want to live in the year 2050? I'm sure, you know, you are living in 2050, and I'm actually giving you some images of the world, and this is coming from the Deep Transitions project. So we have created 3 distinct but overlapping desirable future worlds. One world which we called Earthshot, which was more about high-tech technologies, using high-tech technologies, but also trying to do environmentally sustainable, trying to take an environmentally sustainable path, trying to make technologies much more sustainable. There was also a world which is very much about conservation, very much about first do no harm and then other things. And then there was also a world which you can call it a frugal world, but I don't really like that. I think this is more subsistence and sufficiency world. So we have created those worlds, and we have interrogated these. We have tried to bring those worlds in consideration among private and public investors who could actually invest in technologies and innovations that supports one or multiple of these worlds. But I think I just want to take a moment to ask you this question. You know, if you have to live in a world in 2050, what does a desirable world look like? And it can be about, you know, what you eat, where you live, or how you want to travel. Any aspirations that you have around the future? Yeah?
Yeah, regarding where do I want to live, I think I want to, there's an idea floating around proposed about 15-minute cities. I do want to live, I imagine myself living in a 15-minute city where everything, or most of the things I need will be around me and I can just walk there.
Yeah.
I do want to live in a city with less cars as imaginable, more public and better transportation.
Yeah.
Between cities that are, I mean, in Europe, I would love to travel on high-speed rail instead of planes.
Yeah.
Just preference, because from the city center to the city center, one train would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. No, these are definitely visions of desirable futures. Anyone else who wants to add something very specific, something? Yeah?
Yeah, I want to live in a world where maybe system change will happen, and also like a lot of people will have different vision of what they want to achieve in life, or not following like the capitalistic system, and everybody's just looking on their own future and own goods and
Yeah.
more. So maybe I hope somehow it will be.
Yeah. So you are embracing a world with diverse people and diverse interests of people.
Or just where there's like a change in the thinking paradigms.
Absolutely, yeah. So those are some of the visions that people generally come up with. You know, the 15-minute city or carless city, or you know, opening up, being open to diverse needs and understanding, being that understanding, being empathetic. So you can also have an empathetic city, solidarity city. So now we also talk about solidarity economy. So there are alternatives that are emerging. And this is what really makes you think about what is desirability and where you are coming from. So what makes you think about those definitions of desirability? So what this question does is definitely it sparks imagination, because visions are critical for change. Any change that happens is led by visions. But then you also want to think about desirability, and in a very, not in a non-path dependent way. So what we did in Deep Transitions project is we tried to see desirability beyond what is possible, what is plausible, what is probable, what is feasible, because often some of the future thinking or some of the scenario work does sort of stop with what is feasible with what is available currently. But I think we are sort of trying to make that imagination around desirability, and then try to maybe work backwards on what innovations do we need to nurture today to make that desirable future happen. And it also captures the fact that these images of the world are often technocratic, and yet, as you know, values around what kind of people, values, principles, cultures, routines, norms are as central to societies as technologies. I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to sort of go through what does it mean for innovation to be socio-technical. So this is just to make the point that when you think about a system, systems are not just technologies, innovations are not just technologies, innovations can be social, and you can map a system using, so this is one of the tools that we use in the Transformative Innovation Policy Resource Lab to map a system, which is about diverse actors, diverse materials, and also different rules that guide actions. So this is definitely not about just the technology, but technology is very central to it as well. And then what makes this system a system, and it's not falling apart, is the rules that connect them and how these rules are aligned. So if there is a electric vehicle coming up, so there's a market mechanism to incentivize electric vehicles in a city, then there are also say policies that incentivizes that market to emerge, and there are users who are very environmentally conscious and they want to not get rid of their petrol cars. So all these sort of values come together that makes a system a system. So I'm gonna just skip this because this is about understanding system change. Because this is one of the heuristics, and maybe some of you know about it. It's coming from the transitions literature to look at how systems change, because how systems change through innovations emerging in the niches, and how existing regimes can shift to more sustainable regime, given that the existing regimes are unsustainable, and how that is influenced by the landscape, the macro process, which is more the trends and the shocks, the COVID-19 being one of the examples of a landscape shock that really changed the regime of, for example, how you do online seminars now, is how you really embraced technologies is definitely influenced by this. So you can actually use this heuristic, which is the multi-level perspective, to understand what kind of innovations are emerging and what kind of innovations are actually scaling up to become the regime, and under what pressures, under what landscape pressures. But what it does, but again, these innovations need to be guided by desirable futures. That's the point. So I have some definitions, and I think these slides might be shared with all of you. So I just wanted to unpack desirability a bit, but I think I'm skipping through it. And also, when we thought about those desirable future worlds, which are of course socio-technical, this is not just about the technology, for example. So thinking about mobility as a public right, so we wrote some future vignettes. So what does a person would feel, and how would they be, what would make them excited, what would really frustrate them. So we actually also created stories to make these futures quite realistic. So I gave examples of 2, 3 of these vignettes. Just this was for share it, don't own it. So again, these futures are termed in terms of visions and values, and not just technologies. And of course, there is justice, and I think justice is very much relevant, coming back to Global South, because when you ban cycling because it's causing congestion and it's it's hazardous, and it is a safety concern for the city traffic police and the government, they decide to ban cycling. That is actually putting livelihoods at risk, because a lot of people's livelihood depend on cycles. And then there are people who the smart city vision doesn't take into account. There are women who travel 2-3 hours from the suburbs, coming to city for work, for domestic help work, and go back to their villages. So there is a lot of, and then there are people who are doing all sorts of transportation. And there are people who are just using the public space in very different ways. So how do you capture transitions to an urban future which is inclusive of these people's desirability? And I think I captured the metro and the cycle. And I also wanted to say there are also images of what tram, how Kolkata's image, when you just maybe Google images of Kolkata, you will see the greenery and the tram, and not the smart city. So and there are also innovations around how you can change and transform the cycle rickshaw into more electric rickshaws, e-rickshaws. So yes, so I think I did cover some of this. So questions around who sets the desirability, personal preferences, unequal opportunity to desire, to imagine, to contribute to the discourses, exclusion of non-elite, and also lack of capacity and willingness to embrace the heterogeneity, which is the opposite of the future that you just said. So I think often when you look at a smart city vision, looking at all these aspects of smart city, often what is missing are those dangers of desirability. So this is my last slide, and I think there is a lot of things in this slide, because this is what I have been researching on, and I think what transformative policy and transformative investment can do is to really make desirable futures central to the discourses of smart city, to the discourses of urban transition. So you can think in terms of niche innovation. You can think in terms of how to open up the regimes. You can think in terms of the principles of inclusiveness, in principles of systemic change, system level impact, directionality. And then you can also, this is not just a thought exercise, because real world investors are actually using these principles to think about what would be their investment portfolio. Which technologies are they going to invest in? Which social entrepreneurship activities are they going to support? So I think these are some of the ways we can support desirable and transformative futures. And finally, we are also, so this is, I just talked about policy and investment. So if you are a student, if you are a researcher, academic, what can we do? We can create knowledge infrastructures. So what we are doing in transformative innovation policy is to create knowledge, processes of knowledge creation. And I think, you know, you have the lab, you have the TAU lab, you have other labs where you are co-creating knowledge and analyzing knowledge flows and building knowledge infrastructures. So I think TIP, for example, Transformative Innovation Policy, has a portal where we are trying to see who else is working around transformation, innovation. So we invite also you to sort of submit and help create this database of other, because I don't think we are the only people working on this area of transformation through innovation. A lot of people, and in fact you are working on it. So I would invite you to actually also be part of this TIP knowledge community. So with that, I think and this was my conclusions, and I'm not going to repeat that, but yeah. So I think with that, I'm going to conclude, and I look forward to the discussions afterwards. Thank you.
So, thank you. If I may, also I think we should we can invite the discussants to the desk here. So Michelangelo and Deepa. And I will simply open the floor and perhaps ask Deepa if she wants to start and give back the microphone to Bipashyee in case she wants to.
Yes, thank you very much, and it's very nice to you shared your research. So my question is very much related to your research for smart city proposal in Kolkata. So I am more interested to know about this operational, I mean how this national policy transferring to the regional aspect, especially in relation to the actors. For example, is this new town Kolkata a separate entity? I mean, what is happening then with existing entities? For example, let's say in Kolkata, there is a Metropolitan Development Authority. So are they also participating with this new town Kolkata agency? And so that's one of my questions. And second is regarding also, are there, like especially I'm focusing one of the parameter, participation you mentioned. So are there any other institutions like academic or there are NGOs who are also part of this proposal, and in which role? And the second question is mainly regarding to the investment aspects. For example, so far I know that the smart city mission, there is, I think, 20 and 80% ratio. I mean, 20% grants comes from the national government, and then 80% is like urban local bodies, they raise funds. So I'm more interested toward this aspect. I mean, what kind of approach is, because I think it's a big thing, it's a huge investment. For example, let's say, are they using land, I mean, to monetize, to raise funds?
No, I think these are very, very pertinent questions, because these are the nuances of when you look at a smart city, again, in the context of the entire Kolkata. So to answer the first question, it is actually a new entity. So New Town Development Authority in KDA was the authority that was sort of was leading this smart city proposal, and it is a separate from the KMDA, and so it's a new, and also so in terms of actor category, it's new, as well as spatially it's also very it's a new area. So it's a kind of an extended area of Kolkata. So you can actually, yes, question how much Kolkata is becoming a smart city, or how much peripheral sort of the urban periphery of Kolkata is very sort of protected urban development area is becoming smart, trying to. So it's a you can call it a very spatial, very niche sort of experiment. To answer the other question, I think yes. So there was a lot. There was obviously the Newtown in the NKDA. They led the proposal. They wrote the proposal, and they actually invited all this. They actually prepared and organized all the consultative forums and so on, and where they have invited academics and NGOs. So I actually don't have enough information on how these academics or NGOs or other actors were part of the process of documenting what was, because I know that they participated in those forums. A lot of different actors participated on those forums, but how much they actually was involved in the final proposal, I'm not too sure. And then the funding aspect, I'm not, again, this is not something I have followed through over the years, because I think there was a moment where Kolkata was not selected as one of the smart cities, and they wanted to create a green city. So they actually shifted their vision to make it a green city rather than a smart city, because they obviously didn't get through the competition in the national level. But there is monetization of land. You are absolutely right, because what happens is this is basically agricultural land being taken, and a large proportion of Newtown is the kind of housing development, gated housing development for the urban middle class. So you can see that this is obviously being monetized by housing development people, and that's the model of plan. That's the model embraced by at present. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
So I also would start with some questions regarding the case, then maybe we can go for more abstract and theoretical questions. But in the beginning, because I have to say that my knowledge of the local government system in India is really less than limited. I almost have no clue of how it works. I imagine it is quite different, not just from the Europe. I know a bit, talking about Global South, I've been living for a while in Brazil, so I have some experience of planning, participation in mega urban areas, but I think it's also quite different in terms of, say, administrative structure, relation with the private sector, and so also the scale for me is a scale which I'm not used to deal with, so this kind of thing. So my first question was, I understood that when I read your article, then first thing I went on Google and I Googled Newtown Kolkata to see what was it. So what was appearing to me is the sale of brand new hyper-technologic flats in a neighborhood of Kolkata. That's what I could perceive looking at the Googling it. No? So what I was wondering is, I understood that this plan, well, there was also a national framework that was somehow conditioning the way in which the methodology and the imaginaries, but at a certain point was a plan that was located in a part of the mega city. So with reference to the participatory process there and to desirability, to this discussion on the future, whose future is desirable for who, that kind of future. So who was actually involved? That's something I didn't understand, because when I also work as consultant, sometimes I organize participatory processes. So if someone asks to me, consult people in a city of 15 million inhabitants, I would say, okay, I give up. I will not accept this consultancy. Yeah. Or because my understanding is that they concentrate to the people that was living in the same area where they were going to develop the new town. Yeah. Is that yes. So? As a matter of fact, it's is located in a specific area. Also, the participatory process has been concentrated there. That was.
So I can answer that, because this is one of the figures, because I did ask that question around. Of course, there were many multiple modes of doing that participatory process. So it was not just the consultative forums where 50 people showed up, but there was also surveys done. There was also, public media engagements, getting people to actually come to events. There were flyers. There were also these sort of local carnivals where people were standing and asking people around what they want. So it was more of a question around what they want in their locality. Like, it boiled down to that. So do you, I don't know, like, what is not there or what is problematic in your locality? And we could, so it was basically a survey, to a lot extent, it was a survey of what people need in their day-to-day life, like what is, and then that became a sort of a space of people saying all sorts of issues they have, like waste disposal or water or electricity or school being very far or something like that. But they were, in terms of who they involved in these focus groups, consultations, there was senior citizens, and so there was 5 categories they mentioned in their document, in their official documents. So senior citizens, housewives, and then there was descriptions of who these people meant. So elderly couples residing in apartments in smart city was a category. Women who are with activities primarily within the city at all hours of the day was a category. Professionals with varied work schedules was a category. Students traveling to these institutions, because Newtown is also an area where a lot of universities are opening up their second campus. Again, it's an expanding urban area. So, and also new private universities are coming up. So there's a lot of student population. And then they also said informal sectors. So maids, construction workers, and informal vendors were also invited in one of the focus groups, or maybe multiple of the focus groups. So these were the categories they mentioned.
But just to have an idea, how many people lives in the new Kolkata town? To have I don't want to go for the quantitative bias, but just
no, it's actually very low. It's not 15 million, nothing close to 15 million. Like, that's the big mega city. I think I kind of lost the numbers of the actual population of the Newtown Kolkata, because it has 3 action areas. And so Newtown Kolkata has sort of so it was an urban regeneration project, right? So started off with Action Area 1, then it kind of had more housing development in Action Area 2, more development in Action Area 3. So it's still a moving number, and more people are moving in to these new flats. Some people are buying these flats but as second homes and not moving in. So I think the population calculation would be quite problematic in this.
But in terms of scale, it's quite small, like a neighborhood. We can perceive it.
And I think it's a very nice way to close, and again to thank and applaud Bipashyee. Thank you.